Support for WBFO and What's Next comes from our members and from Health Foundation for Western and Central New York, where racial and socioeconomic health equity are prioritized. Learn more about building healthier neighborhoods at hfwcny.org.
From Buffalo Toronto Public Media, this is What's Next, an hour dedicated to amplifying the voices of marginalized and underrepresented communities across Western New York and Southern Ontario.
We cannot erase, we cannot reform, we cannot make things better if we're uncomfortable having tough conversations, if we're uncomfortable talking about race.
What's Next carries forward our mission to engage in meaningful conversations about race, equity, and the shared concerns that deeply affect Buffalo's East Side and beyond.
Don't stop. Make those families part of your life. Their lives are part of yours. Don't stop.
Together, we dive into the real issues, striving for understanding, connection, and change.
In the suburban area, everywhere, we must work and teach our children.
Good morning. You're listening to What's Next on Buffalo Toronto Public Media, NPR. On May 14th, 2022, Buffalo's East Side was forever changed when a white supremacist targeted the Top supermarket on Jefferson Avenue, murdering 10 innocent people and leaving a community devastated. As we continue to grapple with the emotional aftermath of this unspeakable tragedy, it's important to hold space for our grief, our anger, and our healing. Today, we're joined by someone whose life work is centered on inner transformation and collective restoration. Dr. Siri Satnam is a spiritual psychologist, healer, and former host of The Therapist on Viceland. His approach to emotional wellness blends psychology, ancestral wisdom, and deep spiritual grounding. Today on What's Next, we're proud to bring you two conversations with Dr. Siri. For 3 years, Dr. Siri has worked with the survivors and families of the victims of the 514 tragedy. We'll get to that conversation second, with Charles Gilbert and Naila Ansari. But first, Saladin Allah sits down with Dr. Siri to discuss his path to becoming a therapist.
It's just so much that I want to discuss with you. I think a great place to start is to kind of talk about your origin story. You know, how did you come into this work, or how did this work come into you, whichever way that you see it?
I like the way you phrase that. It really came to me. I mean, often people come to me in my sessions and they don't know who they are. And that's okay. I've come to understand on planet Earth, I'm a transitional object. People come to me when they're in transition. So, and that's exactly what happened to me, how this work came to me. I was formerly a choreographer, dance teacher, dancer. And I was in a video with Michael Peters, who choreographed Thriller, Beat It, Dreamgirls.
Oh, wow.
And so I was dancing in this video, and it was a moment of a break, and the cameras were changing, and I was standing there all alone on the set, and all of the rest of the dancers and the crew were sitting or working, and I just turned around and started looking at everybody who was there, and I went, oh my God, these people are depressed, they're anxious. Or they got really concerns. I'm going to go back to school, get my master's, and get licensed and have a practice in the professional theatrical industry. And that idea just came in that moment. And I had really forgotten, after my dance career ended, that I had a BA in psychology. I had literally forgotten. And so when my dance career ended, I went back to school, got my master's, got licensed, and here I am.
Wow. And, just for the listening audience, when we were off camera speaking, initially when we met, Dr. Siri was able to literally tell me what I ate last night based upon him just observing my mannerisms and things that are going on. So that's a spiritual gift. There's not many people who are able to read into a person on that type of level.
It's intuition. And I just know that I don't know everything, but the more I sit into the unknown, the more is known to me. And so I really consciously, bald-headed black man, didn't know. But when I sit in that space of merging with that which is nothing, I come to a relationship with that which is everything, and I can sort of know things. So it was not to display my skill set, but I was concerned about you. And I think it was the universe working through me to say I was concerned about you, of what I was picking up about your diet.
Thank you. What has been like the biggest challenge for you in terms of living in this space in a world where many people may not recognize that type of gift or may be intentionally working against it?
Well, I don't have the ego where I really need to be seen or heard. And my sort of spiritual contract with my higher consciousness is that I will only serve those who wish to be served. I'm not out proselytizing or beating my chest or standing on platforms. I just got back on social media. I've been off for like 2 years. And so people who really are in the space to receive and who want help, they find me. I'm like a old yogi in a cave. I could probably have a much bigger career if I did get on a few tabletops and dance sometime.
You still got the moves, huh? Yeah. So just being a black therapist working in this space, 2021, I went through a very, very traumatic experience. I woke up and I learned that my father had passed away, and he passed away, peacefully. So I went over to his home to wait for the coroner to get there. And, while I'm processing that, I get news several hours later that my younger brother was murdered violently. So my brother and my father passed on the same day, hours apart from each other, about 2 miles in proximity to each other. And that was the first time in my life that I actually sought therapy, because I didn't know how it would actually affect me.
Sure.
But what was important is that I could find somebody that I thought was culturally competent to be able to understand me as a black man. And in this area, there's not many of our people who are practicing therapy.
Yeah.
Right. And from my experience, I think that a lot of times our people may be less prone to go and seek those type of services and support, because we may not see ourselves represented in those professions. When you think about the lack of representation of our people within those therapeutic spaces, what do you think is some of the reasons why we may be less prone to seek those type of services and support, and some of the things that we can do in order to make that available to our people?
Well, it's very interesting. I think another reason I was happy I chose this profession, or it chose me, is because there are so few of us. And that's a good business move where the demand is greater than the supply. Like of licensed therapists, I think in California, the last research I found was that we were like 1% or less than 1% of all of the licensed therapists.
Wow.
And being a black male, that means I'm 0.00 something.
Yes.
Because that in most of my classes I went to, I was either the only black male or there was one other. I don't think I had any class in my master's or my PhD where there was another black man. And even in my BA, I was the only black man to walk. I went to Carleton College in north of Minnesota. And And so, yes, in getting your master's degree, there are classes where they give about cultural competence. And I was just thinking, this is primarily for the white people. I know how to work with my people. And so yet it's not just white people, but it's like for example, Friday, I was thinking about my practice. I had a Korean woman, I saw a Chinese woman, I saw 2 black men, I saw a black woman and a white man. Now I had to connect with all of those different ethnicities and backgrounds and life experiences. So when I'm really in the therapy room, I'm a therapist who happens to be black. Now you come in and you're a black individual, okay, I can bring my blackness really into the room as a means of connecting and joining with you. But I think of myself primarily as a therapist. I'm glad that I am there because it does entice or encourage more black men, black women to come in and to feel safe.
Yeah, and one thing that I've learned about your practice as well is that you have a very strong spiritual rootedness. And I think sometimes when you look at some therapeutic practices, they don't include no form of spirituality in that or even talk about it because you can't measure, count, and weigh it. So a lot of times people think that it doesn't even exist.
Yes.
How does that inform your practice and serve as that foundation for what you actually do?
Well, it's really who I am. And it's like, once you get licensed, what does that mean? That means that you're safe. You know your clinical work, you know your legal issues, you know your clinical issues, you know your ethical issues, so you're safe. But yet the therapist is in the room. So then when you come into the room with me, you're coming into relationship with a man that has been meditating for 40 years. You come into the room with another therapist, maybe they don't have that experience. Like I have a lot of therapists, licensed therapists that are in my practice, I guess because I'm an OG, been around for years. So they feel safe with me and they know I know the arena. And it was so interesting. I've come to understand that we cannot take another individual where we have not been. Like I had I've heard one therapist talking about how they want to encourage others to meditate, but yet they weren't meditating themselves. It was talk. I try to walk my talk. And so my spiritual work, I got into Kundalini Yoga in 1974. And it's the one thing in my life that has been completely consistent. I meditate daily. So it is in the room when you come with me.
Yeah, so thinking about that just as a practice, we right now are on the cusp of May 14th, where we had a very horrific event that happened here in the city of Buffalo. And, thinking about, your spiritual practice and therapy, how can that serve as a foundation to address some of the targeted acts of violence that we may see that happen in our community, such as what happened on May 14th? How can community members utilize some of the things that you teach and you practice to come to terms with some of that type of trauma?
Well, Dr. Ansari brought me here. I'm so respectful of, and from the community Buffalo Health Center. And this lady of great magnanimity believes in my skill set beyond belief. And she throws me in arenas to where I've often have never been. And so the first time I was here around the, 2021, she had me work with the black policemen. She had me work with the funeral directors that unfortunately saw those bodies that were ravished. She had me work with the black social workers. She had me work with the survivors who were in there at TOPS when this horrific incident happened. of course, they have PTSD. That's vicarious trauma. They themselves were not injured or killed.
Yeah.
But they have vicarious trauma. And they now are living with that, where they may have flashbacks. Like, it's almost inappropriate to get a survivor of something horrific like that and ask them to play it back because it's so horrific.
Yeah.
They don't want to go there. And so there are techniques that, the trauma is in the body and it's in the mind, it's in the heart. So with my work, we have to work on making the mind your friend again, because you may have those flashbacks. Making your heart again to where you can trust and feel safe. You may just be walking around just completely anxious and fear-based. It may manifest in the body, like in our Black community. My God, diabetes is so high, stroke, high blood pressure. All of these are symptoms that have occurred in the body that may be resulting from the severe trauma and stress that Black people have experienced in the culture.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot of work to be done. Like, there are techniques that one can do that are not so invasive, not to have them imagine the experience again, but to help them find the stress that's in their body and to release it, to talk to it, to connect with it, to acknowledge it, to even touch your body where you may feel some stress. Like, often with individuals, I'll have them go into their heart center, and individuals that are used to living in their head and not used to connecting to their heart center. I had one individual, and they said when they went there the first time that they felt a pain, a sharp pain go through their heart. So with these survivors of this horrific incident, there's ongoing work to be done.
Yeah.
It's just not a one-time session. It's ongoing work.
Yeah.
I mean, even the police, who are the first responders, my God, I mean, I said to some of the police, I said, have you ever been shot at? And they were like, oh, please, that's an everyday occurrence. I was sitting there just traumatized listening to them say it. But I just what do they deal with that ongoing stress, that ongoing trauma? That's their work. They're where they used to getting shot at, and then they find it is manifesting in different ways, So the police have a lot of work to do within our community. So there's the police that have a lot of work to do in the community. There are the African Americans who are the survivors of this horrific experience that have a lot of work to do. There's the white culture, which also has to look at itself and to do its healing. And Black people cannot do the healing for the white people.
Yeah.
They got to do their own healing.
Yeah. And I think it has to be challenging, too, because on one hand, you want to memorialize and remember our people.
Of course.
But at the same time, it could be re-traumatizing.
Yes.
Like, where do you find a balance in being able to do that?
Well, I make a memory on a living on memories. That's the trauma, the memories. The memories, and we have to, that's what's lodged within the psyche, and the impact of not giving those memories presence, they turn into, doubt, fears, insecurities. And so we have to, some kind of way, just allow ourselves to go into that very uncomfortable place and see what the memory does for us as we're trying to memorialize our friends and relatives who lost their lives.
Stay with us. There's more to come on What's Next after this short break. When we return, we feature another conversation with Dr. Siri, this time with Charles Gilbert and Naila Ansari, to discuss the doctor's work with the victims' families and survivors of the 514 Tops Massacre. This is What's Next on Buffalo Toronto Public Media, NPR.
The headlines don't stop. The world keeps moving, and through it all, you need news and information you can trust. That's where we come in. WBFO is now Buffalo Toronto Public Media, NPR. Same station, same trusted journalism, just with a new name. From Morning Edition to All Things Considered, from Group Chat to Friday Night Lights, from What's Next to the BBC, we bring you the stories and smart conversations that matter. No spin, no nonsense, just the perfect mix of news, information, and entertainment. Listen anytime on the BTPM Listen app or btpm.org.
Corey here with the Compact Civics Expansion Pack.
America is such a big, wide, awesome place, and to be able to see things that are representative of so many different places can be so important when brought to your tiny town.
Everybody is so kind and loving. I'm here in Buffalo just because of Stitch Buffalo.
From urban farms to rural fairs, we'll celebrate spaces that bring us together and create community.
Watch on the Buffalo Toronto Public Media YouTube channel. From the fringes of the mainstream to the local music you love. Listen to Buffalo Toronto Public Media at The Bridge Monday through Thursday, 8 p.m. to midnight on BTPM NPR at 88.7 or from your smart speaker.
You're listening to What's Next, our place to discuss the important issues of our communities of Western New York and Southern Ontario. We want to hear from you. Click on the Talk to Us option in the BTPM Listen app, and we will work to get your questions or comments on the air. Do you have a story or concern that we should be addressing? Email us using whatsnext@btpm.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is Buffalo Toronto Public Media, NPR.
Welcome back. We are part 2 with Dr. Siri Satnam. I'm excited to be with you all. I'm Naila Ansari Cotillo, and I'm here with Charles, our producer, who is rarely ever on the scene with us. He's always behind the scenes. So this is exciting for me to have Charles here with us and Dr. Siri. So we're celebrating, I shouldn't say celebrating, we're looking today at the remembrance of the victims and lives of 514. And in some ways, I know in Black culture, we talk about death as a celebration, but this is a little different in the terms of a massacre. And as a spiritual healer and a psychologist, the shooting was something that was a collective trauma for all of us in the community. And I know we often don't really think of that as much when we talk about these massacres. We kind of think of the individual, but we don't understand the effects of collective trauma. Can you speak a little bit to that and how such an event can create trauma that then goes on to additional legacies and even more traumas?
Yes, it's extremely traumatic because it was in trauma literature, it was not a tame death. Mm-hmm. It was a death full of surprise and violent. And so it's not only the Buffalo community that is traumatized, it's the entire collective Black community in America. As we witnessed that on television, even if we heard someone tell us about it. So that these are traumatic reactions retention, I should say, that we all are carrying as a race of people through this very frenzied death. And the first time I came here, I worked with the funeral directors, mm-hmm. and who would know that bring them into the healing, because they had to witness firsthand of the horrific torture that was done to those innocent individuals. I worked with the policemen, the Black policemen, the first responders, who also had to contain that man who did that horrific act. But this is also vicarious trauma. The people, it's just levels of trauma. Mm-hmm. The people who were there in the store, who had to hide from the shooter. The people who are friends and relatives of the people that were shot. The people that are witnessing it home. So it's just collective trauma. And we as a race of people, ever since 1600, we're still healing. It's just continual. It's just continual. Where do we feel safe? Parents are continually telling their sons in particular, hold your hands up and don't talk back to the policeman. And no, son, you can't go into this arena, this area, because it's not safe. So we as a people do not feel safe in this country. They're still killing young men, the police, who have done and are seen, tried and released as innocent. And so that also does not make us feel safe by the police force that is supposed to supposedly protect us and serve us. So it's just levels of this trauma, of this from this incident.
Yeah. You bring up the collective trauma and everything that happened and how it was impacting and affecting those that were in the grocery store, those that were around the grocery store, around the neighborhood. I happen to be one of the people that was in the neighborhood at that time. A lot of everybody in the organization knows, as I was hired here, I gave that story. Like, I was present. I remember it. My best friend happened to be going out to one of the corner stores out there because we were recording some content and we took a break. So he went out there and was like, yeah, I'm about to go to one of the stores. So go out to the store, and I happened to go out in front of the building where I was at, and I looked out the window and I see the ambulance, fire trucks. It's a nice day. I'm from that neighborhood. I just asked that question, what happened? Called him up to see if he was good, and he said that he happened to see the shooter, and he seen some of the bodies laid on the floor. And I know for him, that was probably very traumatic for him. For me, I didn't even see the bodies, but just to hear the screams and hear the yelling and hear the anger and all of that, it still bothers me to this very day.
Yes.
What do you say, or what's the best advice you can give to those that are still dealing with that continuous trauma? Like, I will not go into the grocery store because of that. Even when I'm around there sometime when I'm just traveling, I just can't. When they reopened the grocery store, my godmother happened to say she drove by and she frantically shakes because of that fear. What do you say for those that still deal with that?
Well, I would, of course, validate the fear and the experience that you're having, because this is clearly post-traumatic stress disorder, to where you have memories of the incident. You cannot venture into places that remind you of the incident. And this will manifest in terms of anxiety in your body. It may even turn into a great form of restrictions and constrictions in your being. So to validate the person that has gone through this would most definitely be the first level of connecting with them. And then helping them in whatever kind of way I can to release the emotional impact. There's the mental level we have to work on. And still the trauma is lodged inside of the body, the nervous system. And there are techniques to also perhaps help them release that trauma, that energetic element that is still lodged within the body.
Now, there is this stigma surrounding the Black community who are afraid to express or afraid to seek that help because they don't want to, for whatever reason, don't want to admit when there's pain, but they resort to other vices such as alcohol, drugs, other different forms of vices. How can you get those that are afraid to dive into that, to like kind of do the work and find that root? How would you best give that advice to how they can work on getting that?
I know the word therapy has energy around it, especially for our community. And so we may have to disguise the work, the healing, in terms of just coming together with gatherings to where people can feel comfortable and just sharing together, maybe small groups, maybe some forums that we can continue to provide that people can come and feel safe in talking. And once that people come together, they realize they're not alone, that there are others that have had the same feelings and experiences they are having. And so we may just have to take the word therapy away and really make it valid for our community in terms of something where they feel safe to come to.
I have a question about children. Charles and I both have kids, and when 514 happened, it was really difficult for me to explain to my sons what exactly happened. Even going past Tops, Noah's been there before, and he knows that it's about hatred, but he doesn't understand why there's someone that would just hate and kill people because of what they look like. How do you explain that to children?
Well, this, I think, is integral to our healing of the whole race in terms of our history. This is really nothing, unfortunately, new. I mean, I taught Black history in the 70s, and the Tulsa riot was nowhere in the history books. And in just perusing the other day, I have come to learn that there are other communities that have also had this horrific experience that are not in the history books. And so I think sitting down and making a conscious effort to teach our children the history, that we are really an oppressed, targeted people in this country, will bring some insight to our children to let them know that they're part of this collective that is not safe. And we have to be on guard and have to be conscious all the time.
Yeah, because I remember, speaking of my daughter, she was in high school, and once that happened, there was the copycats. People started saying like, oh, there's one that's happening at this Tops or that one, and she was sitting there like texting me frantic like, yes. Dad, why is this happening? I'm scared to even go out to her school, because she was fearful of that, because, she's living in a day and age where we've seen so many of these tragedies happen. And she even got, there was some copycat that was going to go for her school, and she, frantically went, she was scared to go to school, and I didn't let her go to school for a couple of days because I just wanted her to, kind of process everything. And I sat and we talked about just everything. I have this way with just expressing to my daughter, I can't explain why this happened. You know, we don't know why, but you just got to be alert, you know, watch your surroundings. So when I can't even really put into like the words, because it's
a reality.
Yeah.
We're living this, and it's very sad for us. It's traumatizing for the entire collective. The children, the grandparents have lived through it. I was reading one book the other day, and it was talking about a grandmother of how her hands were so rough because she picked cotton in the fields, you know, and her feet were rough because she had to walk barefooted. And so just to know that we are still trying to, like I always say, where is Africa, America? We really don't have a home. And we are hybrid people. And we've tried to make America home for years. They brought us here in chains. So we have never really been recognized completely, wholeheartedly as full citizens. And we're still fighting for that. And we've been hanged. We've been drugged by trucks. Horrible things have happened. So this is unfortunately a reality that we have to face. I myself was born in Jim Crow, raised in Jim Crow. And so I had to stay on the other side of the tracks. We could not shake hands or even talk to white people. So unfortunately, this is a sad, horrific reality we as black people are living in this country. And as it continues, we have an administration now where DEI programs are being extracted, where the top university in our nation, Harvard, is threatened to have their money taken away because of what is DEI? So that's veterans, that's sexual orientation, that's gender, that's race. Anybody that unfortunately now that is not a rich white man is at risk. Federal workers, that's still the working class. So unless you are white, male, and rich, you're at risk. Even white women, they cannot control their bodies and do not have complete rights these days. So it's it's in the foreground now. So it's no need of us being in denial. We just have to find a way where we can live as consciously as we can and protect ourselves and our children and our future.
How do we do, I don't want to say how we do both, because I started initially saying celebration because I know in black culture we talk about celebration of life, right? Yeah. You look at obituaries, the first thing you see is celebration of life.
Yes.
And so when I think of 514, my immediate reaction is to think of celebrating the people that we lost. But then I had to quickly pivot. I'm like, well, now we have to honor because it was a massacre and it's grief.
Yes.
How do you find the balance of understanding this grief while also having a celebration of life for these folks that passed, that had to endure this massacre, and then also the community being grounded at the same time?
Well, the word that comes to my mind is these individuals were sacrificed. And yes, we have to memorialize them. They sacrificed their life. And these were innocent people that were just trying to feed their bodies or their relatives or whomever. And so they are to be honored. Their memory, their lives are to be honored. They were sacrificed with leaving us with the memory that we are not safe. As much as we would like to think that we are. And it gives us, unfortunately, the concept that tomorrow is promised to no one. And that's frightening. So we have to be on guard. I mean, we're seeing in our country today things are happening where people are going to college and are being taken and arrested. So immigrants, well, I think we all are immigrants because I think the land was basically 18,000 Native Americans. So anybody who's come after them are immigrants. So if we get real.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to when you were talking about Black people not having a home.
Yes.
And us coming on boats and chains, things like that. It makes me think back to when the What's Next team had traveled to Charleston. And I bring this story up a lot because it really, I never felt what I felt when I was there, particularly when we went to Sullivan Island. And the reason why I bring that up is because, Sullivan Island was the last stop. Slaves, that was the last stop before they were traded off. And I remember walking up there and just feeling that, like, you still feel that presence. You still feel the connection. It's like you can still feel as I was walking through, I still felt, them getting loaded off. The sound of like the chains, and crazy enough, when I looked out in the water, I happened to see a cruise ship. But when I seen it, I didn't see the cruise ship. My brain went to I seen a slave ship. Why do you feel like for the community it's so traumatizing for us when we go to certain locations that we may not even understand why we're feeling this way, but we do? Like I started to feel more so like the reason why I don't like the water is because of how, our ancestors, some of them they sacrificed themselves by drowning in the water. And somehow, some way, it's one of those things where it feels like my ancestors is still living through me because I can't deal with the water. So how would you like kind of help guide people with that type of trauma when it's like we don't know why we feel the way we feel?
Well, I went to Ghana and I visited those slave dungeons, and I know exactly what you're expressing. The energy in there is very, very heavy, and you could like feel those spirits. I'm not so sure that those spirits are not there, that I've learned in my spiritual work that sometimes when people are shocked out of their bodies, they don't know that they're dead. And if you are not able to get to that light, I'm told you have 3 days to get to that light, you're stuck on planet Earth. The word ghost is in the dictionary for a reason. Once my master said, I wish you had the eyes I have to see all the disembodied spirits that are longing for your body so they can continue to work out their karmas. You need a body on planet Earth. So I'm saying that when these individuals are not attained death and you're shocked out of your body, you often are stuck here on the planet.
How do we get spiritually grounded? How do we get spiritually connected in our bodies to be, I don't know if we'll be ever be able to be a master to see, but how do we get to that spiritual connection? Because I do think that, to what Charles was talking about earlier in terms of trauma, I don't know that we're all very deeply spiritually connected in the ways in which you're talking about. Because to the average person, they can think like, okay, ghost are whatever, these are whatever. But, what you and Charles are just talking about are like a whole different experience that, there's something there. How do we get to that point?
Well, that's where our spiritual work comes into play. I mean, it's really called discipline. We know to go to the gym and work out. We develop our bodies. We go to the universities to develop our mind, but to develop your spiritual self also is work. That's meditation, that's prayer, that's doing rituals that call on the gods to come to you and to come into relationship with them, to begin to see that this is a spiritual journey and not just a journey of the body, to have that foremost in your consciousness that my soul has entered this body to live out its karmas and to work through its samskaras, as we say. So it's a delving into that spiritual world to find your particular path, a real teacher, real techniques that will come to elevate your consciousness and deepen you into a spiritual awareness. It's work.
Mm-hmm. Could you do like 3 hours every morning? I can attest to this.
Years.
Every morning.
50 years. I'm up for it. Well, it used to be from 1974 to 1994. I did, without fail, 2.5 hours a day. Now I got some royalties, so I do about 1.5 hours. But and then in doing that work, it's not to show off by no means, and you even are forewarned about occult powers, that you can get caught into those occult powers, and you yourself can be caught here on the planet. That you use whatever spiritual development you get to elevate others, to help yourself to work through your own samskaras. Like in living your life, you got to become aware of what are your challenges, what kind of people are coming into your life, what are the lessons I have to learn, what must I overcome this lifetime, and that, you know, I often go to that as us as a race. Mm-hmm. You know, why are we experiencing that? And it's very painful for me to even venture into that arena. And the best I've come up with is that if I said before, if civilization started in Africa, then we are really the mothers and the fathers of humanity. Mm-hmm. And we have not yet come back to that realm or to that physical space to where we are, again, kings and queens and aware of our majesty. And it's like if you're not aware of your majesty, then you're not living majestically. And so that's work to get rid of those the challenges that we have to get back to our magnanimity. And so I think it's like I've seen an individual work, like we all have individual work. Perhaps our race has collective work that we have to really focus on what challenges we are having. We're often given challenges to work through them to become who we are. Mm. Like often you'll get a physical symptom in your body simply as a means to bring you into awareness that because you have diabetes, the mental, emotional correlate to that is that you were not protected in your childhood. If you're having a cancer, that means that you have resentment that you have to overcome. So perhaps we as a people have to realize that nobody can put us back on the throne but ourselves. And thus we have to have that courage and that fortitude and that vision to keep it moving towards that image.
You said a lot of powerful things right there. But I do want to talk about something that a lot of people are probably still dealing with, and that's anger and pain. The anger, the pain, betrayal, things like that. How can people who are still dealing with that anger, dealing with that hatred for the shooter, how can they move forward in healing while they're still dealing with that pain, dealing with that anger?
He's a symbol. He was just one individual. This has been happening to us as a race throughout American history. He is simply a symbol. And so they've been coming for us ever since we got here. And it is just a remembrance that this is still happening. We have not exterminated this vile, cruel psyche that permeates America, that is trying to continue to oppress us. So we have to get into this conscious activism. Not to do something is to agree with what is happening. So we all, in some kind of ways, got to use this fire, this anger, to take arms, not necessarily physical arms, whatever means we can utilize to get our psyche back to the understanding that we are kings and queens, and that we're not to live in poverty. We're not to be succumb to the degradation that some of us maybe experienced, the being killed in the street still. So that fire is there for a reason, and we have to learn how to utilize it for our benefit. And that may mean, I don't know, maybe words with others. We write our books. We get into ownership of land in America. We get our businesses. We keep our money in our own communities. We learn our history. We overcome it so we don't have to go back there again. So we have work to do. We really have work to do. And it's so interesting in seeing these protests that are now, and just to get to where we are, I can think of, like the protests we had in the streets with Martin Luther King. And I mean, there are a lot of sacrifices that have gone down. John Lewis, all of that. Those people were conscious activism. And if that doesn't take place, we're at risk.
So we got about 3 minutes left. And I want to end it on some words of encouragement. What is the message that you offer to those still struggling to find peace 3 years after this tragedy?
Well, is peace the goal? I don't know if peace is the goal. We have to be upset by this which happened. And so I think we have to stay at unrest so that this does not continue to happen. And that people are afraid to come into our communities threatening our lives or our livelihood. So I think unrest is where we have to stay. I don't think peace is going to bring us what we need. Yes, we have to work through if you experience the vicarious trauma, you were there at Tops, watching on television, wherever you were at that time, we have to utilize that fire and that anger to eventually, perhaps years down the road, to get the peace that we deserve. But right now, no.
Because anger isn't necessarily always a bad thing.
At all, not at all. We would still, like if, we think of the civil rights movement, if those protests and all that disruption would not have been there, we still be drinking it, fountains called colored, going to bathrooms called colored. Yes, peace is not it right now.
Well, thank you, Dr. Siri. I mean, I got enlightened. I feel like I'm on my spiritual journey after these last 30 minutes. Thank you for taking these deep questions. It's not an easy week for any of us at all. And I think your words of encouragement are helping us a lot just sitting here, but I think also for the larger community. But you have been here for 3 years. You're working with the Resiliency Center and the Community Health Center of Buffalo. So you will still continue to be with us. For folks that don't know, he came all the way from Los Angeles to be here and has been with us for the last 3 years, working with folks from the community, victims and families. So we appreciate you so much, and we're honored to have you here.
My pleasure.
And this has been What's Next on Buffalo Toronto Public Media, NPR.
Support for WBFO and What's Next comes from our members and from Health Foundation for Western and Central New York, where racial and socioeconomic health equity are prioritized. Learn more about building healthier neighborhoods at hfwcny.org.